Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Mortgage Message Show. My name is LaGiglia, and on today's episode, we're highlighting who's buying this spring with my guest, Marcus Rembert of the Keller Williams Infinity Group. Marcus, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it, man. Good talking to you.
Absolutely, man. Great to have you here as we start 2021. We certainly came together on more than a few deals in 2020, and so just looking for the same type of excitement this year. And wanted to bring you on as an expert in your field for my audience. We've been talking about different kind of buyers who are buying this spring, and I wanted to get into a little bit of what I call kind of my favorite buyer because to be transparent, I was one of them when I bought my last home, and that's called a boomerang buyer. So before we get into what that is and the definition of that and some tips and tricks for the boomerang buyers that are out there, Marcus, if you could just give my audience a little bit of background about how you got into real estate.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So I've been in real estate for about 70 years now. A transition from the corporate world where I was a project manager with a software company. And I just always had this kind of love of real estate for various reasons. And so one particular year, it's one of these years where during the course of going to church, my wife and I were just talking about our goals and everything. And I said, you know what, I'm going to get my real estate license this year. I don't know. I just felt impressed to do it. And I was still working in corporate and went and got my license earlier that year. And later that year, I got laid off in the fall. So I just looked at my wife and I said, well, hey, I have my license. Might as well just jump in with both feet. And she got her blessing. And, my first year in real estate, I started with a small boutique brokerage where, they basically, great guys who ran the brokerage. And they basically said, okay, hey, welcome. Here's a binder. We're going to give you some leads, but let us know if you have any questions. And so, no, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so about 6 months into it, I'm scrapping, I'm, working with anybody who would breathe. If you needed a roof over your head, whether it's a rental, whatever the case may be. And I was working hard, but what I figured out was I was fortunate enough to be on these different transactions where there was a sale or a purchase with more experienced agents. And they kept saying, hey, you forgot to fill this out on the contract, or you forgot this, right? And I was like, oh yeah, I was going to get around to that anyway. So I had to just kind of feel my way through it. And I just looked at myself about 6 months into it. And I said, hey, if I'm really going to succeed in this business, which is what I wanted to run it as a business, I'm going to have to find a better way of getting some education, because you're dealing, what I think what we're blessed to do, Joe, is we help people with probably what's the most important and most valuable for most people transaction in their life, which is their home. And so I said, I'm going to have to get as educated as possible on this. And I can't, at that point, because that a smaller brokerage, they didn't have a structured training platform. So I was having to self-educate via podcasts, YouTube, whatever the case. So I was a sponge, which was helpful, but that wasn't going to be the best case scenario, going forward to build a foundation of my business on. So while I was training myself, there's one podcast in particular, this guy out of California, he would interview all these top producers across the country, regardless of what offices they work with. And there was this common thing that always stood out to me about KW and the KW agents. And it sounded more like, hey, this is how you build a business. This is how you really help people and move the real estate business and profession forward. So I pulled up Google, found the closest offices to where I lived, and went in and set up interviews for myself. And my second day in the office, I called my wife, said it's the best decision I ever made.
Well, that is such a great jump off to this interview because, let it be known, certainly, Marcus, you are certainly branded as a community guy. You are certainly branded as, within so many different facets of this Plainfield community. And we're happy to have you, and we're excited to kind of get into this interview. And I will say this to agree with you. It's amazing to me how success leaves clues. And certainly those Keller Williams contracts are always on point. I'll just say that. So I'm glad you brought that up. That was a great point. So Marcus, we so appreciate that background. So excited for this coming year together. And I think such a conversation piece that happens to individuals that have a story, and we know that everyone has a story.
Yep.
We look to build the bridge. We look to create an 8-lane highway for people to be able to experience the path of home ownership. Marcus, if you can, to start this interview, help my audience understand what exactly is a boomerang buyer.
So my understanding of a boomerang buyer is someone who was just went out and bought a house, and they were moving up, or they went out a few years ago, and now they're coming back into the marketplace again now, and possibly, as a move up, if you will. So that's my general understanding. Yeah,
absolutely spot on. And to that point, what's categorically speaking about a boomerang buyer, it can be someone that had credit challenges in the past. It can be someone that, as you said, experienced home ownership and for whatever reason had to move away from home ownership and now wants to get back in. And it's an exciting segment of the market because from my perspective, this to me is the opportunity for the boomerang buyer as rents continue to go up for them to enter the market. And so I guess I'd like to ask the question to you, Marcus, when you're speaking with a boomerang buyer, someone who may have touched the stove and to them it was too hot, but now they're looking to get back in. What's some of the initial challenges, if you will, that they may not be able to overcome?
That's a great question. So what I found in that case, and most boomerang buyers, I don't know if you have the same experience, Joe. From my experience, most boomerang buyers were a byproduct of the Great Recession. So from 2008 to all the way up to 2012, 2013, where we filtered through all of those short sales and foreclosures in the marketplace. The first thing I have to do is tell people, hey, it's okay, and just deal with the mindset, because nobody wants to have a negative real estate experience. Nobody goes into whether you owning real estate to live in or to invest. Nobody sets out to fail. And my main goal is to first establish some type of a common ground and just say, hey, it's okay. It happens to everybody. And you can rebound from that. And so then I come from a place of education, because I found some buyers feel like, hey, whether it's a foreclosure or short sale, I can't. They usually add on more time to the buying process than what's necessary. So they say, well, I know I can't buy. I'm not even sure if I can buy anything now. And they carry that quote unquote failure with them. And they say, hey, it's a learning experience. And now we learn from that. And the good thing about it is there's some options in place for you to take what you learned from, and now we can position you to win. And this is how. And so we just go from that standpoint.
I think it's a great point that I don't want my audience to miss that you just shared, which is, at least from my perspective, as you said, it's amazing to me when speaking with a buyer, a boomerang buyer, that more than not, they lean towards having a worse perception about their qualifying than it actually is.
Yep.
And in your experience on the real estate side of things, talk a little bit about from that process of once they finally realize, oh, you know what, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Where do you take that client from there to kind of get them back into the excitement of finding their new home?
Well, I first start always with, okay, hey, this is why this period of time is different, because not only do they tend to penalize themselves for a mistake, they also feel like, oh, now, obviously nobody wants to repeat a mistake. And now they hear similarities in this market that they did then, that the market's hot, it's not as hard as it is to buy a home. And I said, yeah, those things are true, but here are the differences between that market and this one. And then I establish what those differences are, both positively and somewhat if if it applies negatively, and then this is how we can best meet your needs, and here's why you're buying a home. And again, this is how we win in this market, because I was, I bought a home during that period of time too, and I saw the values fluctuate. And when I bought a home in '08, I bought at the top of the market, and guess what happened to values? And so I know to a degree what that feels like. And now, however, we have the ability through real estate and in the Chicagoland market, because we get knocked for a lot of things here in the state of Illinois, high property taxes, and some rightfully so. However, we also have the benefit where the coastal cities don't. First of all, Chicago is like the New York City of the Midwest. So you pretty much have everything here. You have transportation, two major airports, great restaurants, so on and so forth. You're not susceptible to natural disasters so much. We may have an occasional tornado, but we're not susceptible to hurricanes, for the most part, earthquakes, so on and so forth. So we have a more stable market, and prices haven't, while they've gone up, prices haven't gone totally crazy, like say a Seattle or what San Francisco has done, or Oakland. So it's still a relatively affordable major city. In fact, I challenge people to tell me a big city like this, on this scale, this size, that's more affordable throughout the globe than Chicago.
I could not agree with you more. I could not agree with you more. There's two things I want to extract from that very valuable share right there. The first one is, I think it's so important, and it's why I'm highlighting you as a guest on the Mortgage Message show. I think it's so important that when a buyer, especially a Boomerang buyer, is deciding to come back into the market, as I said, there's a million reasons why, and we hope that the value of this show is to empower them to that one excuse why they're not, to overcome that. There's a million reasons to get back into home ownership, but I think it's so important to work with an agent like a Marcus that has the empathy to say, hey, I know what you went through, and I came out the other side, and I'm here to give you the cheat code on how to get through this, and
Yep.
and let's do it together. And having worked with mutual clients, I mean, that's exactly what you embody. So I'm so glad you shared that point. And the other point is, which I think is just as relevant, is so many people, as you said, they're talking about this hot market, they're talking about concerns about affordability, but in the same conversation, rents continue to skyrocket.
That's right.
And no one's building anything. Give me a little bit more on that. Expand a little bit more meat on the bone on that for me, to get someone a little bit more in the know as far as how the relationship between renting and buying, obviously where the scale is tipped towards buying.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I'm a big student. I consume things on podcasts, YouTube, things of that nature. And what about a year or two ago, there's this slant towards, hey, I don't want to buy. There's a lot of risk in buying. I want to rent, because then, I'm not having to be responsible for, let's say, if the furnace goes out or the water heater goes out, so on and so forth. And then I could just, leave when I want to. And there are some facets of that are true, obviously. Now, the myth behind that, though, is that you don't want the commitment of paying for those things. And really, what I tell my renters I say, you are paying for those things. They're just built into your rent already.
Thank you. I'm going to make sure that I take that clip out, and we're going to promote that right there. Continue. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. It's like you're paying for the furnace to be taken care of. You're paying for the central air. You're paying for the hot water heater. You're paying for everything that you see in there, you and others are paying for. It's just built into your rent. So it's not so much that you don't know. Then I have to ask them the question, is it as much that you don't want to be responsible for those things, or you just want some certainty around what your costs are going to be per month, so that you don't have those surprises?
Yeah, so good.
What I typically find is that's the point. They just want, which is what we all want in life. We want some form of predictability. That's why we love Amazon. Amazon isn't the cheapest option out there by far. You can go to the various stores, but Amazon gives us certainty that when we hit that button, within 48 hours, there's going to be a brown box sitting on our doorstep. So they want cost certainty, what I find more times than not. And there are a number of ways, which I know you're familiar with, Joe, that we can do that, especially for a first time buyer. Well, first, do we look at a house that has more things that are updated? And if not, then do we build some things into our negotiation strategy to see maybe it's getting them a home warranty, which will cover the any service calls on those major appliances and mechanicals, during the first 13 months of ownership. That way they know their costs aren't going to be, uh, prohibitive during that first year or so of ownership. The other thing is you do get cost certainty. You don't have cost certainty in renting because what I tell them, I'll tell most, I was just talking to a buyer, a first time buyer the other day. And I said, I bet every time you renewed your lease, what happened? And they said, oh, it would go up. And I said, yep. And did you sign off on it? They're like, well, yeah, that's what happens when you rent. And I said, okay. And I'm not here to knock landlords. I mean, hey, it it's a if you're providing somebody with a roof over their head and you're doing a good job of it, no, that's fine. So one of the benefits of home ownership though is my mortgage, the only time my mortgage typically changes is maybe if my taxes go up, but if my taxes are going up, so are my property values.
Mm.
Then, and the other way my mortgage changes more times than not, which it did a few months ago, is when I refi. And actually it changed, it went lower.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm saving myself a couple $100 a month through refinancing and leveraging home ownership. You can't refi your rent. You're not going to go to your landlord and say, hey, I want a reduction in my rent of $200 a month because I paid you on time for the last 2 years. We all know how that conversation is going to play out.
Absolutely. That's so good, Marcus. That's so good. That there's so much value in what you just shared. I'm really encouraging the audience to go back and listen to that again. My takeaway from that is that working with an experienced agent like Marcus allows you to focus and put energy towards the things you can control, and it gives you the knowledge and empowerment to allow the things you can't control to not consume you. So
That's
good.
right.
So
Yep.
good. Marcus, I want to ask you this question. I know I have my own personal answers, but this interview is about you. When working with a boomerang buyer, and getting them to the closing table once again,
Yep.
getting those keys in their hands, seeing those smiles on their faces
Yep.
of what was disbelief turned into belief. Tell me if you can, what's some of the most rewarding things about that for you?
Oh man. Oh, now that now you get into the bread and butter of why I do what I do. Um, no, we're blessed to make a decent income in this business. However, I know, and for you, I think this applies to you having known you for a bit of time now, is that I'm really driven and rewarded by what I see the impact of what we do is on our clients.
Amen.
And how you give them a peace of mind. You get them to the closing table and they win, and you see that relief where up until that point, they enter this with, okay, maybe it'll be different this time. They have some hope. But when they get to the table and, between the two of us, we say, hey, congratulations, you've done it. And here are the keys to your home. And I usually see it during the final walkthrough when I do the final walkthrough because my business partner, Steven, and I, we do a couple of things. We do kind of like a red carpet where we roll out the red carpet for them, do the final walkthrough, and just interview them at that point, and you just see like how relieved and how proud they are of that moment. And the fact of the matter is, you and I both know that, especially for boomerang buyers, purchasing a home isn't as difficult as we make it out to be.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say we, I mean all, no, everybody, the whole industry. And I think that's what one of the things, that you and I do a great job of, just say, okay, let's try to simplify this process as much as we possibly can. And where applicable, let us do the heavy lifting for you.
Mm.
And yeah, so that's when I see that. And here's the other thing: not only that, but when it's a family with kids, when I
Mm.
see their kids excited. And
Yeah.
and the kids buy into the process, and the kids start taking ownership and saying, hey, this is my house.
Yeah. That's the good stuff. That's the good stuff. I can only imagine. I always get a little jealous of those agents like yourself who get to have those moments on the walkthrough.
Yeah, yeah.
Where the kids running and saying, "This is my bedroom." That's so exciting. Marcus, I just want to tell you that this has really been a incredible interview, and so excited for my audience to really get to know you more. And what I love about following you and following your journey is that you certainly subscribe to the thought of providing as much educational and entertainment content around this industry as possible. I love following you on all the socials. If you could, Marcus, two things. One, if someone who's watching right now, especially a Boomerang buyer who has been inspired and empowered to get past whatever fears have been holding them back, to at least say, you know what, let me call Marcus and find out what point A is. And
Yep.
from hearing what I hear today, I think he can take me to point B. What is the best way for someone to get a hold of you? And then behind that, just because I love consuming the content from you and your business partner, Steven, give me a few ways that someone can follow you, please.
Sure. So the first way is at Property Pro 74. So that's going to be the best way to follow me on all your the traditional social media platforms. So Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And then you can also follow my business partner and I at the Rembert Blount Property Group. That's REMBERTBLOUNT Property Group on Facebook. That's our business page, and our YouTube channel as well, where we do. We're all about, as you mentioned, we're all about making this fun, educating, and just being positive and inspirational. That's pretty much our branding, because there's enough negativity in the world. You can get that pretty much anywhere, and we just want to be a source of light and hope for as many people as possible.
Well, Marcus, I'm here to tell you, you're an asset to our industry. You're an asset to our Plainfield community, and just so honored to be partnered with you in a lot of different ways. And so thank you for this time, and thank you for our audience for tuning in to another episode of the Mortgage Message Show. We're excited. If this information inspired you, if someone you know needs this information in front of them, please share, like, comment below. We'd love to hear from you. My name is Joe LaGiglia with the Mortgage Message Show. We'll see you next week, everyone. Take care.
Take care.